Well, a great Saturday morning to everyone. Welcome back. I am sports mental health empowerment coach and licensed couple marriage and family therapist, Dr. Lauren Pitts. You know who that is. That's my amazing co-host, Ronnie Ransome Jr. We'll tell you who that beautiful being is in just a moment. This is House Talk Pregame, everybody. Happy Saturday and welcome back. Yay.
Saturday. How are you, Dr. Pitts?
I am wonderful, Ronnie. It's going to be 88 degrees in Fort Worth today.
Stop. Look, it's still spring. Like spring, it's not even a month into spring yet. It's gonna be a nice, balmy 60 degrees today here in Virginia. But it's spring football Saturday. We got some spring games going on today to cap off spring season and everything. So a lot of things going on this weekend. We have a very amazing guest with us today for our show that we can't wait to talk with. We got a lot of news to cover in the HBCU world. Dr. Pitts has a very powerful mental health tip of the week this week, which means that, I have no mental health tip of the week this week, other than to protect my mental health, not going after her.
I can't play with you, Ronnie. Nah.
But, we have a really good topic centered around today's show called Performance Praise. And when we talk about praise and stuff like that, obviously, everybody enjoys praise. Everybody wants to know that they're doing a good job, to know that they're on the right track with whatever it is they're doing, whether it's internal praise, external praise, whatever the case may be. We know praise provides information to athletes, not only about performance, but also the notion of self. In other words, it tells athletes about the quality of their motor performance, but it often tells them about their self-worth and competence. So we're going to be talking about how athletes can manage, dealing with praise. And sometimes what are some of the maladaptive things that come with praise and stuff like that can hinder an athlete's mental health and their physical health. And that's why our special guest, Caitlin Urinda, is here today as well. So we're going to introduce her in a few and have her talk about this wonderful topic that we got today. It's going to be a powerful conversation that we're looking forward to getting into. So, and as always, y'all, we know we're live right now on Facebook and everything like that, but you can always catch us live on HSRN right now at 11 a.m. Also, you all know, we popping in these streets, all right? So because we popping, that means we also live 10 o'clock at night against Quiet Storm. Caitlin, see, you new to the show. You are a new member of the House Talk Pregame family. So one of the things that I always like about our show is that we compete with the Quiet Storm at 10 o'clock at night every Saturday. And if you're familiar with the Quiet Storm, hey, a lot of things happen after 10 o'clock with the Quiet Storm, but sometimes people want to listen to us and talk about sports and mental health. So I'm excited about that. But if you don't want to listen to us on a Saturday night, you can always check us on Sundays at 6 p.m. as well. And remember, HSRN is empowering the HBCU family's head, heart, and hands to deliver the impact we all know it can. So make sure you catch all the other great shows we have on HSRN as well. A lot of great information being dropped on those shows, so make sure you check them out as well. Dr. Pitts, you want to go ahead and kick us off with our mental health tip of the week?
No. No, I don't. I want to look. I don't remember what I was going to say. I said, Ronnie threw me under the bus. I said, you threw me under the bus, and I'm like, I don't remember what I said my mental health tip was going to be. And it's
you had a few in the pre-show. Yeah, you had a few.
I'm like,
okay. See, Caitlin, this is what she does. See, she'll have a mental health tip of the week, and then once she remembers it, she goes in. And after she goes in, she thinks I'm gonna go after her. Not happening.
So what I want to do first and foremost is I want to remind everybody that Saturday, April 23rd, Speak Our Truth presents the second annual pop-up shop. It is supporting survivors of rape, sexual assault, and gender violence. It's from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at River Legacy Park at 701 Northwest Green Oaks Boulevard here in Arlington, Texas. Tickets are $15. We've been pushing that event, so the promotions are on all of our social media platforms. If you're not in the DFW Metroplex, that's fine. Tickets are only $15. Go ahead and grab 5, 10, 15, 20 tickets. Send them to a domestic violence intervention shelter. Send them to a high school and have them give them to the scholar athletes at the high school so that they can attend that event. It's going to be an amazing event. I'm actually speaking at that event. So it's just such a powerful cause. As you all know, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We want to make sure that we are raising awareness on this just such an intense topic that is just plaguing not just the US, but all over the world. So we want you to support that event, and I hope to see you there. My mental health tips of the week. So we're talking about praise. And one of the things that I was saying before we came live is how and we're going to talk more about it during the show, but how I really truly believe that, particularly when you're dealing with scholar athletes who have a low sense of self, scholar athletes that have complex home lives, scholar athletes who have fractured attachment, thereby meaning that they are insecurely attached in how they form relationships. I believe that makes them more vulnerable to those individuals in their lives, whether it be coaches or trainers or teachers or whomever may cross their path in the athletic world, that can groom them through praise. So when we talk about praise, people more times than not, we consider praise to be a positive thing. But within the context of grooming, praise is a very bad thing. In fact, I would argue that praise is like salt or like sugar. Used too liberally, used in abundance, it can be extremely, extremely harmful. But used in moderation, it can be extremely beneficial. So what's the key here? The key is balance. But for parents, I want to say to you, where praise is concerned, you want to make sure, and I say this in any parenting executive functioning context, you want to make sure that you are the person that you are, for lack of a better word, that you're your son and daughter's hero and shero. The healthy praise that your child receives in life and within the context of their athletic performance, they should be able to look to you for appropriate praise, because you doing that can be a protective factor, because then they're not looking for the external validation from coaches and from trainers and from other people who may victimize them. It is your responsibility to properly praise your child and to strike that balance so that they know that what they're doing is good. And what I'm about to say might sound really odd. I don't believe in praising our children for things that they should be doing or that they're capable of doing. I believe that we can praise them for exceeding expectation, if you will. But if the bar is here based on the fact that I know that my child is capable of doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G in the athletic performance, then okay, good game. I'm not saying don't give them any props at all. You played extremely well, and I'm proud of you. But when you get over into praise, I mean, really like, picking them up and spinning them around and we're going to go shopping and we're going to reward this outstanding thing you just did. And I'm about to spend some more money to get you additional training and all of this stuff. That should be because the performance exceeds the regular bar that's been set. And I think that that's how people get over into trouble, because they just they go overboard with it, right? They go overboard, and it's a double whammy, because you can also puff a child up so much that they get this superiority complex, and then and it can just get messy. And we're going to talk about all of that during the show today. But the operative word here when it comes to praise is, first and foremost, parents need to be aware. You need to be the first two people in line to give your child healthy praise, so that they're not looking for external validation outside of the home that makes them more vulnerable and susceptible to enemy encroachment. And then the second thing is, you have to have balance. You have to have balance. Set reasonable expectations for your child and their athletic performance. And then when they exceed that, honor that appropriately with a healthy amount of praise. That's all I have, Ronnie. See, now you can go. You got a tip. Stop playing with me.
Well, no, I appreciate that tip. And, so I'm going to save my rebuttal for the actual conversation, because I think you made a great point. And when we talk about, praising versus overpraising, and, what exactly should you be praised for, as opposed to, this is what you're supposed to do. And I think there's a fine line between that. And I think,
Mhm.
as much as this is an objective topic, it's also very subjective to, each
Yeah.
individual. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna save my answer for, when we get into the discussion.
Okay. Caitlin, that means he's gonna beat me up. And Caitlin, you can beat me up too.
Weapons. I have some tools on both sides. I have an opinion about that. I think there's some things to be said. Yeah.
Bring it.
I think as an athlete, it's that was something I struggled with, right? In speaking up and out about being abused by somebody who was in place to protect me. Is because my identity was I was a swimmer. That was my identity because I received praise from that, and I did exceed expectations. And my parents did it in a healthy way. Like I went to a UT swim camp every summer, and that was like a coveted swim camp. They turn out some of the best swimmers in Texas, some of the best swimmers in the world. And that was what I was setting out to do. That I was going to be a swimmer, at a collegiate level. Like I wanted to be an Olympian. Obviously you realize at some point in your life, you're like, okay, maybe I'm not like Olympic material, but I'm going to chase the dream. And you become so enmeshed with this identity that when it stops, it makes you vulnerable to a lot of bad things out there, in so many ways. And if you get too far into it or you're overpraised for that, and that becomes your whole identity, that can really mess with you in the long run and your mental health. I think we've seen this huge transition of when athletes come out of college, right? You played 4 years in college and that's the end of your career. They can't separate anymore. They have to have something that's you've been doing this for your whole life, and now it's just abruptly stops. So now what?
Yeah. And even that part, and we're definitely gonna get into that, because I was definitely a victim of that in some way, shape, or form too. And even I can't wait to get into this conversation, because I think even praise can be a trauma bond for a lot of people as well, especially athletes. A lot of times praise is through the form of a parent or a caregiver trauma bonding with you, because a lot of times we'll get into I don't want to get into that right now. We're gonna get into that. So thank you for that mental health tip of the week, Dr. Pitts. We're definitely gonna dive more into that in a few. So let's get through some of this HBCU news, because there was a lot that we missed last week, and there was a lot that happened this week. So to piggyback on last week's news, so last week in Richmond, Virginia, they had the last Sunday, they had the NASCAR race at Richmond International Raceway. And to commemorate the HBCUs in the state of Virginia, Virginia State University and Norfolk State University both had NASCAR cars dedicated to them in the race. I know for the Virginia State NASCAR was driven by a Winston-Salem State student. I think his name was Rajah Caruth. Forgive me if I said your name wrong, but I want to say it was Rajah Caruth from Winston-Salem.
Why did you go to your enemy to get a driver? Oh, never mind.
Hey, look, hey, we love all HBCUs, but hey,
so
sometimes you just gotta let hey.
Okay.
No smoke. No smoke with the Rams. All right. We cool with the Rams. All right. We cool. I promise. We cool. So shout out to them for that. In other HBCU news, so earlier this week, North Carolina A&T announced that they are jumping to the ACC conference for all their sports starting this fall. So shout out to them. My initial thoughts were, as much as I would love to be on the football teams, boy,
it's going to be something to see. And they're calling Duke out. They play Duke for homecoming, don't they?
All I'm going to say is this. I just hope they have the bodies. That's all I'm going to say.
I saw that they're going to play Duke. I said, ooh, did they just call Duke out? I think they play Duke for homecoming. It's going to be funky in Carolina.
Wherever they play Clemson at.
You going?
It's going to just shout out to A&T for the jump. I mean, it's huge. They're the first HBCU to be at the FBS level, especially so shout out to them for this move, because they literally just jumped to the FCS. Well, they were already in FCS, but they just jumped to the Big South Conference like maybe 2 years ago. So now they're jumping to the ACC. Shout out.
It's like going from middle school to the pros.
Yeah, literally.
Assignment 8th grade.
But that's so exciting.
no disrespect, no disrespect to the
Yeah.
FCS or the MEAC or anything
Yeah.
like that. However, it's a big jump, so I mean, but hey, sometimes you just gotta go over the hill and deal with it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. Obviously this gives them more allocation of funds for recruitment. They get
Yeah.
more scholarships.
Better facilities.
They get some of the revenue from the ACC now. And I mean, A&T doesn't have bad facilities. I think their stadium holds, I think maybe 25,000, which I think Wake Forest, for example, holds, I think 35,000. So it's not far off. It's not far off from some of the ACC schools. Speaking of that, Tennessee State also this week announced that they're playing Notre Dame next year in 2023. And they're also having hopes that they can jump to the FBS by next year before they play Notre Dame. So shout out to Eddie George at Tennessee State for doing big things down there.
Okay.
I also know at Virginia State, they're adding 4 sports total, but 3 sports this fall. They're adding women's soccer and men's and women's lacrosse. And then men's soccer will be added in the spring of 2023. So
Nice.
shout out to Virginia State for adding those sports. Let me make sure. Also, shout out to I can't remember which HBCU she graduated from. But Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson for being nominated to the Supreme Court this week, the first African American woman to be voted to the High Court. So shout out to her.
Yes.
Big accomplishment.
Huge. It's like I can't tell you like how watched it and I was just like crying tears. Like this, it's just amazing to see like representation, like to just see somebody who could withstand like such ridiculous lines of questioning, like with such integrity and poise and composure, and like still rise. And on like, it was amazing. I think it's deserves like another. I was so excited.
It does. It does. And as a woman of color, there just aren't words. I mean, there just really aren't words for women everywhere, for women of color, for little girls, and we have a female vice president, and to have this woman of color as a Supreme Court justice, and all of my senses are going crazy when I heard some of to your point, Caitlin, because I work like craziness, so I didn't get to see it. I have to go on YouTube and watch the video, CNN.
Right.
But some of the foolishness that transpired, like you said, the questioning and how certain folks behaved in the whole 9 yards. I'm not even going to give that any life-giving energy. But just, standing ovation for that representation. And, hopefully, as we continue to move forward, we will continue to see more diversity in the highest court in the land that is, representation of all of us, right? In everything that we are as this great nation. And it's the same thing. It's like, even though I didn't get to see it live, I was just so full of emotion, because it's hope. It's a breath. It's life breathing energy that says, with all of the craziness that we have going on in this country, there are still lifelines that make being an American citizen such a tremendous blessing. And as crazy as it is, I wouldn't want to live anyplace else on earth but right here in this beautiful United States of America. So I'm honored. I'm honored.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be a woman. I'm honored to be a Black woman. I'm honored. So yeah, just phenomenal.
Shout out to Ketanji for that huge accomplishment, and definitely paving the way for future generations to come forward. Last but not least, Clark Atlanta alumna Asia Thomas becomes the first Black woman to own a Subway franchise in the United States. So shout out to her. I don't like
Subway, but I'm gonna cheer for her anyway.
That's crazy. I didn't even that's a super fun fact. That's awesome.
Subway, I'm just
I'm from Jersey. I did subs. It's just a whole different
Yeah.
Philly, New York, Jersey, how we do subs, the whole Eastern Seaboard is just different than what a Subway sub is. But so no disrespect to Subway. I know a lot of folks that like Subway, but
yeah,
I grew up on subs that you need like two hands and a crane to hold and
And shout out to Subway, but I'm good on Subway. But if y'all want to sponsor us, hey, I'll eat all the foot long subs y'all need me to eat for a 30-second commercial.
I'll eat their bread is good, and I'll eat their meatballs.
But it's crazy. Subway used to have the best chocolate chip cookies out of all the fast food. Their cookies are cookies. They do have cookies. Legendary. But enough about them. So let's go. Did you have any other news, Dr. Pitts?
No, we're gonna go ahead and you can do this formal introduction of this amazing, wonderful Caitlin Urenda that we have with us. I was so excited. We were hit and miss. We were playing phone tag and Zoom tag and everything else, trying to get on each other's calendars, and finally got this thing ironed out. And I'm telling you, when you all find out what this woman is all about and what she's doing, you will know why we are so incredibly honored to have her with us today. I can't thank you enough for making time for us in your insight. Look, she got me beat, Ronnie. Her schedule is bananas. You hear what I tell you? Bananas. But she made time, and we are eternally grateful for it. Go ahead.
And we really appreciate it. We're gonna have to get an applause button on here eventually.
Right.
So Subway, if y'all want to see y'all's foot long, go ahead and get us an applause button. But no, so we have a very special guest you all today, Miss Caitlin Urenda. So Caitlin, welcome to House Talk Pregame. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday morning to be with us this morning. So Caitlin, we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what sports you played, and a little bit of your background as a student athlete.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me on, Dr. Pitts. Thank you for your patience in playing phone tag with me. I swear I'm not that bad about missing calls. I've been trying to transition calendars to one because my Outlook calendar throws stuff to junk. And so I was it's been a mess. But so thanks for hanging with me. So I, and this is funny, I actually just looked this up a couple of days ago. I was like, do any HBCUs have swim teams? You know how many have swim teams?
I'm going to say less than 10, honestly. 1. Wow.
Oh, wow.
1. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. They need swim teams. This is, grew up a swimmer. I started swimming when I was 5 years old. And I'm from El Paso, Texas. And that was not really I'm Hispanic. My parents are Hispanic. They're from the interior of Mexico. But I'm only 5'6", right? And Olympic swimmers are 6 something, right? Their body is the size of their thigh is the size of my body. But we cranked out some pretty great swimmers from El Paso, and our program. So my high school coach created a club team, a select AAU, whatever you call them, a select team. And it was by design. So if you wanted to swim at the high school he coached at, you also needed to swim on his select team so that he got you from the jump. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I swam select with him, and that was the goal. We've had plans, since I was 7 to swim at that high school. He's produced the most All-Americans. And that was just my drive was to become an All-American, to go swim at Notre Dame. These are all the things I wanted to do. That was cut short. I was sexually assaulted by not my coach, but a coach at my high school, a gymnastics coach. And obviously, so it ended my career because it ended and resulted in a pregnancy. And so that I was 16, pregnant, actually I swam with her for 4 months. So the first 4 months of my pregnancy, we swam. That's what I always tell her, we swam together. She's 13 now, refuses to swim, even though she has this God-given talent for it, won't swim. But through that tragedy, and I know it's really it sounds really tragic, and at the time it very much was, but I'm the author of the story. Like, I wrote, this is my life. So, it didn't end. It didn't end in a tragedy. Like, I have an amazing 13-year-old daughter, and an activist was born through this. By the time I like got my footing and got back up and was like, okay, this is crap, I'm going to fight back. Like, I'm going to change this. My statute of limitations had run out, and I was like, oh no, this is like, I had to dig deeper, and I started diving into, what I could do, like what was still possible to be done. And through that, I just gained and built a community and a network of people and of change makers and troublemakers, like disruptors, like to challenge the status quo. And along the way of that, I've maintained close to the sport I love. I'm a swim coach, and I coach high schoolers. And now that I'm on the other side of this, where I'm like the coach and I have kids that are young and I'm coaching them, and I see how like both like the dangers of both sides, and like the need for these like establishments and rules and Title IX protections for both coaches and players and things like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story. So yeah, just have found I don't know, I guess everyone always says like she finds power through tragedy, or tragedy fuels her, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
Man, thank you for sharing that, Caitlin. That is that's very powerful, and like you said, obviously very, very tragic when that first happened. In the end of your athletic career, and it also forced you into parenthood at a very early age when you were still a child very much yourself. Thank you for sharing that. Unfortunately, we see this too oftentimes in women's sports, whether it's gymnastics, swimming, golf, any other women's sports. We hear this far too oftentimes where, coach, doctor, somebody associated with the team or program, inappropriately touches or even, sexually assaults and, molests women. If you don't mind, talk to us about like, when that first happened, like I would imagine, who did you feel like you could, find comfort in, or even like, even begin to start to flesh this out, when all these experiences first started happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely nobody. I told nobody. That was a secret I kept till I was 20. And for so many reasons, right? My dad was a probation officer, and I was very much thinking like, holy crap, my dad could very much kill this person and probably get away with it. And then I have to deal with that. Like, I was 14. And so like I played a couple scenarios in my head, and I was like, nope, I can't tell anybody like this. There's no way like this works for anybody. It definitely didn't work for me. Right. Like we talked about earlier, it would ruin my identity. It would ruin my reputation. It would ruin my name. It would ruin all these things I have been building since I was 8 years old. Right. So I couldn't have that. And then I was afraid what my parents might do. And I was embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. And so then when I was pregnant, I decided like, you know what? I'm just going to eat it. I'm just like, if you want to call me the girl who slept with the teacher, I don't care, because nobody's going to know this. Like, absolutely nobody. Can't have that happening. And then what actually like thwarted me into sharing was that, he did it again. And it wasn't to me, it was to 3 more students. And then it was like a very public issue. Like then he was on the news and his face was plastered everywhere. And like, everybody knew that I was like the mother of my daughter, and like that he was the biological contributor to that. And so then everybody wanted to know like, well, what do you know? And what was your part in this? And blah, blah, blah. And I was like, then I felt like this, and then this was this whole other journey of like, I felt culpable for the other victims, or for the other survivors. And then, but when I finally did find the place and get to a place in my life where I could share, I went to counseling first, and I went to counseling because I thought my daughter needed the counseling. It wasn't me, it was her. She needed it. And the counselor kind of like very immediately spotted like, hold on, this is this, like the way you speak about this person, like that's not a normal reaction, or that's not like normal. It's not typical of how somebody would speak about somebody, that they were in a relationship with. And I was like, oh, that's not what happened. I was not in a relationship with that person. And so she just kind of like started pulling back these layers, and then was like, you realize like you were groomed. You were, that you were groomed, and that you were conditioned to believe that like you couldn't tell anybody and you couldn't do these things. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess so. Like it took a minute. Fleshing it out, it took 6 years for me to even like say it out loud. Like that's what happened. But when I did, and I told my parents, or I told my mom first, it was right then and there I created a community, right? Even though she's my mom and she's my ride or die, like I created community in confiding in my mom. And then that was like the safe space to do it. And I would say too, like, it can be to whoever you want it to be. And that when somebody confides in you, that it's, oh, wait, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, okay. That it's, when somebody like confides in you or like shares their story with you, like you as on the receiving end have to understand, like, you don't always have to do something about it either. You can just be the listener, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of what my mom did. She didn't really like force anything, or like really, I think she had to process all of this on her own too.
Obviously,
But like,
yeah.
she just was she was an absolute listener. She just listened, and that's it. She didn't ask me any questions and anything like that. And so that made it like really safe for me to like continue to like give her the full scope.
Go ahead. You had a question, Dr. Pitts?
Yeah, not a question. Well, sort of. But it speaks to, so I remember what my original mental health tip was now. But so Caitlin, you just touched on it, and why it's so important to create an emotionally safe space for your scholar athlete or any of your children to be able to come to you and know that you are their safe space. That is such a powerful tip that you gave, that, folks, what you touched on, Caitlin, is exactly why I didn't tell when I was being abused growing up, because I didn't think that anybody would believe me. I thought that I would somehow be blamed for whatever, they thought in their head I must have done to bring this on myself. How anybody could think that a child could be responsible for something so heinous. But the bottom line was there was just nobody in my life that created that emotionally safe space for me to feel comfortable telling. So just like you did, I carried that secret for a long time. And it eroded my sense of self. It eroded my self-esteem and my self-worth and my self-love. Kudos to your mom. I celebrate her. I celebrate your strength, but I celebrate your mom's strength too, that something in her clicked and made her know that even though she was processing this horrific thing that happened to her child, I applaud her for being able to be emotionally present for you in a way that you needed to help you to navigate that. Folks, there has to be emotional safety, because what ends up happening is when your kids can't come to you, it makes them that much more vulnerable, and another layer of grooming that can occur, because by design it shifts them to somebody else, but their safe haven should be in the home with their parents or their primary caregiver. So thank you. for that.
Yeah. And I think that's such like an important, a thing that an element that I think a lot of homes are missing. And like one of the things I didn't say, like it was the embarrassment aspect wasn't there. There was a layer of like, it was embarrassing for me, but I thought I would embarrass our family. And that was like a cultural thing, like that,
Right.
A Hispanic family, like that was like my dad's worst fear. And I couldn't let that like be true. But I think it's really important too for parents. Like, I think parents make this mistake of like, you could be a really great parent and like, you have really great parents and they're like wholesome, amazing people. Right. But like, if they've never given you the permission to like tell them anything and like tell you how they're going to respond as a child, you're not going to know what to do with that. And so like in our house, we tell our daughter, like you can tell us anything.
Yeah.
We're going to listen to you, no matter how bad you think it is.
Right.
And we'll give you some options of like how we're going to respond. Right. Like, let's just say like, I don't know, like just example, like her friend got caught or her friend stole something from the store or she stole something from the store with a friend. Right. Okay. So there's some absolutes. Like I definitely like it, and it depends. Like, do I have to tell that other kid's parent? Is this the first time it happened? Like going over like this triage or like action plan with her so that she's part of the decision-making process. Like, okay, these are some absolutes that are going to happen. Right. So like if you're a parent and you have an athlete, like let them know, like, hey, if you ever experience these things, you got to let me know. And I promise, or I can assure you that these are some absolute things I'll do. And then there's some part of, and then you'll play some part in the decision-making as the athlete of coming forward and talking about it. And if you don't have those plans and you're not communicating that with your kid, like how would they know? Like that's a really big thing for them to offload. And if they don't have like some sort of assurance in their brain, the likelihood of them coming forward to you, it's not going to happen.
All right. You touched on something else that's really key. And it also tied into one of the reasons why I didn't tell. And when you said you were concerned that your dad would kill, that was one of the concerns that I had too. Like everybody knows I talk about it all the time on the show that, I was raised by my mother and stepfather and my grandparents and the whole freaking village because my family's massive. But growing up in a family that violence, it was like the name of the game, folk knocked heads and ask questions later. And growing up in a violent and very, very aggressive community, I did not want the individual's death on my conscience. Like and that is a horrible place and space for a child to have to be in. So what do I say to that clinically? What I say to that clinically is that whole vigilante justice thing. There have been, as mothers, right? We're ferocious when it comes to our kids. As dads, we're ferocious when it comes to our kids. As family members, you're 9 times out of 10, your first thought is going to be, oh, somebody got to die. But at the end of the day, as hard as it is, that vigilante justice is not the way to go, because what that does is rob the child of the protection that they need. They've already had this horrific thing happen. And now you go to prison. Where does that leave the child? Where does that leave the child? And I know, because, I already know. I know some of our listeners are like, Dr. Chris, you can say everything you want. Ain't nobody gonna know. We're gonna put that black hoodie on. You know where I'm from now. We're gonna put that black hoodie on and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. They're gonna come up missing and anybody gonna know that we the one that made them come up missing. That is not the answer. It's not the answer. A child shouldn't have to bear that burden. None of us should have to bear the burden of, oh, well, this horrific thing happened to me, but if I tell them, then I'll lose my mom or I'm going to lose my dad because they're going to kill the person that did this to me. We have to find a better way to systemically iron that out so that our children are not carrying these burdens. Makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think like I would just like to add to that. Like, I mean, that was literally a line my dad would say. Like, there's not a jury in town that would convict me. Like he wouldn't even care about a body. He just
I'm
was
gonna
like,
walk.
nobody's gonna convict me.
I'm
And
gonna
you
walk.
know,
Yep.
yeah. But like words matter, and they carry so much weight. And like even if you
Yeah.
say it in such a joking way, like to a kid, they're like, ah,
They
my mom
internalize
is
it.
kind of crazy. Like she just might. I don't know, And so those words, like
Yeah.
I like urge parents to be so cautious when they talk about like these situations, and be so mindful and intentional, because your kids hear you and they are listening to you as much as you think they're not. They are, and they make decisions off the things that they've heard and seen you do. So, that's just super important.
I even think to both of y'all's points about, your fathers, or, the loved ones, saying like, if somebody would have hurt you, this is what I would do. And I think, even hearing that as a kid, one of the things I think about is like, even when a parent says that, it's like them projecting an insecurity of, I can't keep you safe 24/7 in all areas. As much as, even me, I'm a new father. And, I would like to tell myself that I want to keep my son safe, no matter what. However, realistically, I grew up as a kid who had traumatized parents. And, praise, it's funny that praise kind of ties into this, because my mom was somebody who was heavily traumatized, who was sexually assaulted, beaten, physically abused by family members and stuff like that. And as a result, the way she saw the world to protect me as her son was, I'm going to try and shield you from as much as possible. I'm going to try and praise you for all the times I wasn't praised. But as I got older, what I realized is like, as much as she tried to say, I'm gonna protect you, I'll never let anybody do this to you, I'll do this. She's like, if somebody ever puts their hands on you, I'll kill them. I'll, what, all these things. And I'm just like, Mom, you can't do that. Like that, you can't. There's gonna be a day you can't protect me. There's gonna be a day I'm gonna have to figure this out myself. I've never been in a situation like neither one of you have been, where, I have been, violated, personally in a way that, is very traumatizing and triggering. So I can't speak from that level, but, being the child of somebody who has experience in that, and seeing how their mind operates as a way of like, how can I protect my child from the dangers of the world? And I think a lot of parents do that. Like I mentioned earlier, the trauma bonding of praising and stuff like that, And to your point, Caitlin, you made a great point, and Dr. Pitts, you've said this numerous times, both of you all experienced a level of counseling that you all were able to create a safe space for you individually to flesh out these traumas and flesh out these tragedies that happened to you in a way where you can now reflect on them and look at them like, yeah, like you said, Caitlin, like, yes, this tragedy happened to me, but I did not allow it to dictate and write the rest of my story. I didn't allow this to rob me of the rest of my life. I addressed it, I faced it, and now I know how to manage and live with this in a way that does not impede on my growth as a human. I think a lot of times parents who don't get that opportunity to have that safe space to flesh out those traumas, those tragedies and things that happened to them growing up, some parents, they either model that same behavior and their kids pick up on it, or you have some parents who will sit there and say, I will go to all lengths to prevent you from going through this. We all, and Dr. Pitts, you see this all the time too. And Caitlin, I don't know if you saw this, growing up, or having, peers of friends who, families overprotected them. And then the moment they get out by themselves, it's like they have no sense of control or direction, because it's like all these things are being given to me at one time. It's overwhelming. I'm going to do all of it at one time to make up for it. And even that right there is a kind of a form of, kind of setting your kid up to, be in a position where, yeah, they might have to go through some of those trials and tribulations to kind of catch up to speed, which I'm glad we're really talking about this topic of praise, because, both of you all have made great points about that fine line of, Caitlin, you made a great point, with what you do with your daughter about, if something happens, look, please tell us, no matter how bad you think it is, please tell us, we will find a solution or work towards a solution together. But we don't want you to feel like you have to do this on your own. And I think that's a great point, especially with your daughter, becoming a teenager and getting ready to go through her teenage years. Dr. Pitts, this is something we talked about just a couple weeks ago. Oftentimes, I think a lot of parents fail to realize that, your teenager, your 13 to 14-year-old, they'll be an adult in 4 years. God willing, they'll see adulthood. Oftentimes we talk about adulthood, we talk about the things we want, but we don't prepare for it actually happening. It catches us off guard. It kind of catches us by surprise. You turn 18 and you're like, oh, damn, I'm 18 now. Like, oh, I don't have to listen to you no more. And it's new territory that you're not prepared for because you never learned how to prepare for it. I think you made a great point, Caitlin, about how do you prepare your child for when these things happen? Like, how do you help them manage these things in real time? One of the things me and Dr. Pitts talked about is it's not like kids don't feel the same emotions we do as adults. As adults, we just have better reference and better, emotional regulation skills that we can use because we've been through these situations so many times. We have things to play back on. A lot of the time, these kids are going through these emotions for the very first time, and they're overwhelming, they're painful, they're hard at times. And if a parent can't model that behavior in a certain way, they're just going to do exactly what they see and what they're grown up in. So I appreciate both of y'all touching on that. I'm sorry for rambling for that long, but
No,
I had
you're
to get
fine.
that out.
You're fine.
No, I think
Caitlin,
it's a good way to like bring it all together, bring it home.
I want to ask you a question, and I want to lead in with this because I applaud you for the conversations that you're having with your daughter. And I want to know how she responded to those conversations. But before you answer, I want to say this. One of the things that when I'm working with my clients around parental executive functioning skills and having these types of conversations with their kids, right? One of the standard responses that the kids give is, I know, Mom, I know, Dad, I'm not dumb. And it's like, don't let that fly.
Yeah.
Don't let that be their response. And because so oftentimes, again, when I'm working with families, right? Parents are like, well, Dr. Pitts, every time you turn around, Dr. Pitts, you know how kids are. Every time you turn around, they're telling me they know. And what do they know? Okay, but you, as the parents are getting frustrated with hearing the kids say, I know, but, and they let that go because they get so frustrated and so tired of hearing it. But when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to rape, when it comes to molestation, when it comes to gender violence, that's not one of those conversations that you want to just let fly because you're tired of saying to your pre-pubescent child or your child that's in puberty that, you think you know everything, you'll learn. No. That's one of the ones, that's a teachable moment. I don't care how frustrated you are, you need to capitalize on that and use it as a teachable moment, whether they want to hear it or not. So Caitlin, how does your daughter respond to these types of conversations? And how does your husband, how do you and your husband sort of keep that conversation with her around these types of issues fluid?
Yeah, I think he plays a really stellar part in that. Like I always say, like, I think I cloned myself, see Adelaide for details. Like that kid is me. And my husband is the best manager of both of us. And so, I can have a conversation with her and like really drive like the points where like, she knows Mom talks about sexual assault for a living. Like she knows Mom does these things, or like, we make her very much aware of like, what I do and why is that I do this. And it makes it a really easy gateway for us to have these conversations with her. But like there have been times like in, her 13 years of life where something has happened to a friend of hers, or there's been like some sort of situation that required, her telling me. And us having to like figure out a solution together. She's pretty responsive to it. And I feel like we really have, for the most part, I mean, I think most parents will say this, or they think this, like they think like, no, I got that on lock. Like, that's all good. Like I genuinely feel like she can come to one of us. And there's some stuff she refers to me to. And then there's a lot that she goes to David, to my husband, Dad. Because he's just a much calmer person, just has like this very like mellow vibe where I'm like high strung, go. Like, let's fix it. Let's find a solution. And sometimes that's not what she needs. She needs the absolute listening, and he's a pro at it. So, I think that's really important too, when you're, as parents, like you have to know, you have to play to your strengths, right? As parents, like you both can't be the same thing. You both can't, there's balance, and that's, that's the point of having, whether you have one parent or two parents, you have a role as a parent, and identifying what that role is and how it feeds to your kids, like safety and being like a productive member of society and a contributing. And like what I feel like we're building is a child, or is a human who has to, like be an active bystander, like giving her the power to, like empowering her to speak up and out when she sees things that are incorrect, like giving her the knowledge and the sounds to say to kids or say to like her friends when stuff happens. Like, there was like a groping incident at school. She told us about it, and it was like, okay, well, I can, one, tag the school in, two, I can give you some things to say, because it didn't she didn't see it happen, she heard it happen. Like, so there was like some things where me like going directly to the school wouldn't have exactly made sense, and it didn't happen at school. There was like all these layers to it, right? So we gave her a couple of options, like, these are the things you can do. Make sure that you tell this child this, and like, maybe I do need to talk to this person's parent, or maybe I, like some of these conversations need to be had, but like, you got to let your kids know like how you're handling it every step of the way, because like you said, Ronnie, they're going to emulate it. They're going to they're going to do what you did. And so if you don't like tell them what you're doing, they have no idea how to respond. And, that's like, like same thing, like my mom, I know she called my grandma when I told her what happened, and my grandma was like, I have no idea what to do on that. Like, I don't, we weren't the best at like really helping any of you guys with that. My mom was a nurse for over 40 years. So, she had some background in there of being able to handle it. But like, yeah, same. Like if something happens with Adelaide, I'm like, Mom, what do I do? Like, I'm 30 years old, but I'm like, Mom, what was the answer? And so I feel like cluing your kids in and making them like an active part of their life and safety is so key. And her response has been pretty positive. And you have to, it's not just one of those things where you just do it once. Like, this is a constant conversation. Like we're building and molding humans to be adults. Like you said, Ronnie, like one day they're just going to be an adult. Well, these are the things I feel are super important for her to be an adult and exist. And so, I think she's pretty receptive of it.
Exactly. And to your point about, and I know we touched on this earlier in the show about praising and stuff like that, finding the difference, praising between, doing something and actually, completing something, like Dr. Pitts was talking about, if you do something that's over the bar of expectations, we'll obviously praise you and whatnot. One of the things I like to always, and this is something that I know that I'm going to have to work on as my son gets older, but I always try to encourage parents to do it, is when we talk about even praising, like one of the things that I've learned to try and do is not necessarily praise the action, but praise the effort. Oftentimes, because to your point, Dr. Pitts and Kaylee, you touched on this too, there's things that, as we get older, there's just things you just have to do. I find myself having this conversation a lot with teenage boys is, one of the things I always hear mom say is, they don't do the chores, they don't listen, they don't ever clean up after themselves. And I'm like, they don't find no value in it. Like there's no, as to a teenage boy, there's no value in doing chores because the responsibility is not on him. But as you get older, that responsibility falls on you. And I tell them like, look, one day you'll wake up, your mom and dad ain't gonna be in there to come behind you and clean you up after they yell and curse at you. But I always say, if you can start at an early age praising their effort, even something as simple as, I see you trying so hard on your homework, or I see you, taking the trash out, praising the effort as opposed to what the task is. Oftentimes that's a good way to help kids, really reinforce, the effort of doing something. Oftentimes, we get praised for like, oh, if you do take the trash out, well, thank you for taking the trash out. Okay, cool. So I know if I take the trash out, I'll get praised. But if you say, I appreciate you, taking the trash out, doing all that, praising the effort of doing it, can kind of reinforce them like, okay, so if I show effort, if I do good things, they might give me reinforcement and stuff like that. And I think, but finding that balance of praising your kid, but also like, look, well, you got to do this one day. Like, I can't, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you don't want to do your chores now. Like, become an adult and don't do chores and see what happens, So I think there is a fine line with that. Kayla, I did want to go back to something that I know and I hope y'all didn't touch on it while I had stepped away for a second, but I wanted to ask you this as we kind of, maybe translate this over to the student athlete side of this as well. So you said that, when you found out you were pregnant, that you still swam for an additional 4 months, with your daughter and stuff like that. talk to us, like, what was that transition like? You know, because you said you had all these aspirations and goals of, you know, potentially being an Olympic swimmer and, you know, going to Notre Dame, being an All-American and all these things. What was that transition like for you? And how much of your identity was wrapped up in swimming and going through that transition? You know, was it a situation where, you know, like we've been talking about praise and stuff. Do you feel like some of your personal identity was maybe meshed in your swimming identity due to praise and things like that? And just talk about how that transition was afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. So I was pretty fast, but mostly, and it translates really well now. I was a highly technical swimmer. Like I would always get complimented, like you swim beautifully. Like, and I do. I'm gonna toot my own horn here. I do. I have amazing technique. It's gorgeous. Like it looks like effortless. Some people swim funky and it works for them, and like they're really fast, and that's just like some stuff you just don't tweak. But like on a technical level, like I swam perfectly, and so I was constantly praised. Like, you have an incredible stroke. You have like, you look amazing. Like, you know, like, how did you learn that? Or like always asked and like sought for like advice, or like, you know, my elbow kind of goes this way, or like, how do you fix that, or whatever. Right. And so I swam a summer league. When I say I swam pregnant, it was my summer league. And that was like so much of my childhood. I grew up, there was a community, like a neighborhood pool, one block behind my house. And I was there all summer since I was 8 years old. It opened at 12, it closed at 8. I was there all day long. Like, my brothers and I lived there. And so it was like the last year of, like, in my brain, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be a kid anymore after this summer. So like, Mom, I want to swim. And she was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, if you want to, go for it. Because I knew like I wasn't going to swim anymore. I knew like those things were done, but I did have like a kind of like a finality for it. Like, I was like, I'm going to swim this summer, and then I'll be a mom. Like, then I'll do like the thing. Right. But, again, it was like a part of the planning with my mom. Like, I was like, I want to swim. And she was like, I think you should, because you love it and it brings you joy. And like, you know, I was getting a ton of heat, like a lot, you know, all these stereotypes and stigmas were being pinned to me. And it was like washing out like all of the accomplishments and accolades I had collected over the years. And so it was kind of like a way for me to transition out of swimming. And then I realized that, you know, there's different ways to be a part of the sport. Like, it doesn't, I had to revision it, and to be creative doesn't mean that you have like, you know, like you're like an artist, but I had to be creative and staying close to the sport. And still like finding a way for it to like be near and dear to my heart. So after I stopped swimming, after I had my daughter, I did like a master's league for about like a year and a half, and then blew out my shoulder. And then I was like, okay, no more swimming. So, but I was still an athlete. I have this competitive edge constantly. Like, that is still enmeshed in my identity. I am so competitive. Everything's like a contest to me. And it's not like with other people, it's with myself, like constantly. How can I do more good or whatever than I did yesterday, or be more impactful to the world, or contribute more to the world? So I started running, which was really helpful in my healing process, in healing trauma. And, you know, I found sanity in running. And then I saw like a coach, or I met a coach and was like, hey, have you ever tried a triathlon? And I was like, no, but I can swim and I can run. And so then I tried that. And, you know, like I just always found these ways to stay active and stay an athlete, but resigned that maybe I'm not I'm a soul swimmer anymore, but I'm still an athlete. And that's something that's just, it's okay to be built that way. But releasing some of those, like, I don't know, that's your entire identity, or your entire like composition of you, it's hard to shake that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I know you say you coach swimming now, and so how rewarding is it for you to be able to coach young swimmers and things like that? Have you seen a swimmer that maybe emulates a lot of you as far as your technique, or just that knack to just be a great swimmer?
Yeah, definitely. That is like I love coaching. Like that is the joy. Being on the deck, like watching kids improve. I coach at a small private school, where these kids aren't necessarily like there to swim in college.
Mhm.
This is more of like an academic notch for them. And so
Gotcha.
to like instill this like competition, but we still do well. Like, I mean, I've been coaching a varsity team for 3 years and we've made 3 state appearances. Like, they do well. Yeah, it is competitive. It's just not like it's not how I swam, but it's still competitive.
Mhm.
And so yeah, getting them to like understand how this will serve them. Like it's more of like, yes, coach, I'm here to swim, and like, yeah, I'm here to win, but like I'm not going to be a swimmer forever. So like trying to give them these life lessons of like like consistency is key, like showing up, giving effort. Like you said, like I see that effort of you doing this. I do the same thing. I don't ever congratulate you for winning a race because there's 100 million kids faster than you, but I appreciate you showing up to practice every day on time, prepared, ready to go. Like I love that. I appreciate the grind. I see it. Like, saw you walk in with your jug of water today. Like, great job on getting that in. Like there's those praises that, and then there's praises as like a team. Like
Mhm.
in my second year of coaching, it was the year of the pandemic. And it was
Mhm.
like, are we going to coach? I mean, are we going to have a season? Are we not going to have a season? And we had to coach kids, not very hard either, because they did such a great job on their own. But like, this was for the good of the team. Like we had one senior, and we had the kids made a commitment to like stay as safe as they can, wear masks, avoid places, so that our senior could have his season. And
Mhm.
like that was a coaching moment that just like you're never gonna find that. That's just never gonna happen again. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
those in those senses, like yes, I have so much fun. And it just like it feels like a kid, but then I'm also like, wow, I'm the adult. Like they come to me with like kid problems and I have to like have the answers. You know what I mean? So it's it's easy to like, especially when you love the sport so much, to feel like you're in it, but then like you have to separate, like you are the adult in that room.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
are the adult on the deck.
You ever get in the pool and show them you still got it?
They've asked me a few times. They've asked me a few times. No, but I will like before the season starts, just to make sure like like, because you can't teach technique like, I mean, I can teach technique standing up, but like if you haven't done it in a while, I feel like I got to get in the pool every so often and be like, does that still make sense, that arm movement? Like, yeah, that's right. Or like, you got to feel it. But no, I
Mhm.
haven't gotten in with them. They're working on it though. They're like, what if we do this? Or what if we do that? And I'm like, we'll see. We'll see. But yeah.
So I kind of have another question that's kind of related to coaching and things like that, and I hope this sounds right as I ask it. So, sharing your testimony with us about your experiences being a swimmer and being groomed into a very unfavorable situation. As a coach now, how do you feel as being a coach, being able to not only in your community but the swimming community as a whole, like what are some things that you feel as a coach you can do to make sure that this just devious thing kind of continues to dwindle down and it isn't a thing anymore? And I hope that makes sense, as like because I would imagine I hope to God that as a coach that you don't have a athlete that comes to you with anything similar to your story. I would imagine that would not be fun at all. But how do you as a swimming coach now try to make sure that if you do see or hear something that kind of resembles what you go through, how do you go about continuing to be an advocate for that to make sure that nobody has to, at least nobody shouldn't have to endure something like that?
Yeah. So what's really interesting about the way I'm set up as a coach, and the way that the school does it is, I think it's a pretty cool system. So I am not a teacher. I have a regular job, and like not teachers have regular jobs too, but that's not my day job.
You know what you mean.
I'm not a
Got you.
teacher. but I coach. I'm a contracted coach, right? But the main coach is a teacher there. And when it was explained to me why they bring in contracted coaches, is like it's a checks and balance for the safety of the swimmer, right?
Okay.
If you have two teachers or football coaches, you guys are buddies, and somebody makes an outcry to you, you're going to talk to your buddy and be like, hey, like, this kid told me this, what do you think? And then it might like incriminate or like tag somebody else in, right, that you guys have worked with for forever, that you see every day. You're less likely to do something about it. And so I was like, wow, that's an amazing like checks and balance. Like it's a subtle checks and balance, but it's there. And then we do quite a bit. So we work with like Darkness to Light, Positive Coaching Alliance, which I love because that also brings in like how to combat racism in coaching, how to be an ally to your athletes who don't look like you, right? And so all of these like tools are given to you, right, to at least at our school, that have made me have the tools that if somebody did come to me and say like, hey coach, this is what happened or whatever, you know, I think that I could handle it pretty well. And then I check in with them a lot. Like I only see them in the mornings when I coach them, and our season runs for 12 weeks. So I see them 3 months out of the year. And I don't really like see them after. Like I don't teach at that school, I don't work at that school. Like, so I see them during swim season, right? So I always make sure to let them know like, hey, here's my business card. Like, you know, if you ever need to talk, like I'm open, coach is here. I always send them a text at the end of the season. You know, like it was an honor coaching you. You're a great athlete. I look forward to next year, blah, blah, blah. Here's my contact info. Share it with parents. The parents have my contact info. And I check in with them. Like I remember stuff. Like I think it's really important to have like a vested interest in your athletes. And kind of like make yourself relatable that they'll want to share with you, you know, and then you kind of have to like share some stories about yourself to be relatable as well. So I think just those things kind of help in preparing me, or, you know, for what we want to never happen. So.
And thank you for answering that. Dr. Pitts, you had something?
Yeah, I want to just pause for a moment, and I just want to shift gears for a tiny moment because I was just notified that Steelers quarterback Dwayne Haskins died after being struck by a car.
I just saw that.
Reported by ESPN. So just wanted to take a moment to pause to send our condolences to the Haskins family, to the Pittsburgh Steelers organization.
Only 24. That's crazy.
Oh.
Only 24. That's crazy. Like that's crazy. I literally just saw that like 10 minutes ago, and I was like, bro, what? Like we were just in my group chat with my team, we were just talking about him because I'm a Steelers fan, and we were just talking about him, and that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, no, definitely.
Our hearts and prayers go out to the Haskins family, to the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. And what do we always say? You know, get those mental health professionals in there to rally around the team and family, because it's a devastating blow. It's a devastating blow to lose anybody that you love and care about, and that's such a major contributor to your you know, we know that these athletic teams are families, but to lose someone so young, it's just a different blow when it's a young person. Just such a horrific tragedy. So our thoughts and prayers are with the Haskins family, the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and the NFL family as a whole. So yeah, I just wanted to pause and acknowledge that. Caitlin, when you think about your journey and how it all transpired, and how you with you for the amount of time that you did, what suggestions do you have for our viewing and listening audience that they can do to make it safer for survivors to come forward, for people for our athletes that are being victimized to be able to come forward, whether they're chasing an Olympic dream or an athletic scholarship in college or not.
Yeah. I think some of the biggest things, and this is like at a parent level, and this is sometimes it's people don't like when I say this, but if you are a survivor of sexual assault and you decide to come forward with it, it doesn't always mean legal action, right? It doesn't mean that you have to go to court and have this like big thing and be questioned and your life just put on full under the microscope kind of thing, right? And I think that parents need to understand that too. I mean, I think absolutely like some sort of reporting should be done at whatever level that it happens at, but and you know, what happens after is not on the survivor, right? That's if you're a child and you're assaulted, whatever happens after that is not your problem. It's not your responsibility to handle it or deal with it or any of that. And then as parents, you know, you have to have these conversations with your kids. Like, you know, so you send them to practice and you get out of practice. I think our first like question out of our mouths is, how was practice? Right. And your kid's like, fine. And you're like, okay, great. And that's it. But like, you have to like have different conversations and different approaches to things. Like, it's got to be a more of like a collaborative effort, right? So like, tell me about your team's dynamic, or like, tell me what you think about the team. Tell me more. Give me your thoughts. What are your opinions, right? You got to talk to your kid about stuff like that. I think setting up a plan, you know, that it's kind of like, unfortunately, we do live in a world where this is necessary now, but, you know, we all have fire drills, right? Because in the event that a fire happens, we all need to know how to get out of the house or the building or the school. I feel very strongly that if you have a child, you got to have a plan, you know, of prevention, of like what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. You have to walk the walk, right? Like, so I think this is a really important thing too. My husband is very good at, he's very tall. So he looks a little intimidating. And when he speaks, people are like, well, whatever he just said is goes, because he, you know, I always like tease him, like, it's just because you're tall. Like, if you were not, like, nobody would listen to you. But you know, as parents, like, your kids have to, like, you know, Ronnie, you said this, like, our kids emulate us. So you have to talk the talk. Like, if my husband hears somebody say something inappropriate, or men, or you know, inappropriate conversations happening around either me or our daughter, he's like, hey, this is not the place, or like, in what world do you think that's acceptable? And you know, like, him doing that gives our daughter permission to accept that into her life and to have these like standards. This is setting the bar in her head. And so, you know, those conversations have to be had. And then you know, the plan, you actually have to have a plan, and a why is this important? And you know, what's going to happen? And I think one of the most important things, I think what makes it a little bit more digestible, because parents, I think we all want to think like, not my kid. This would never happen to my kid. And that's okay. I understand. Totally get it. So what I often suggest to parents is, well, maybe not your kid, but your kid's friend. What if somebody comes to your kid's friend? I mean, what if your kid's friend comes to them and makes an outcry? That's a lot of responsibility for your child. So let's make a plan. What are we going to do if one of your friends makes an outcry to you? And that helps you build like a family plan, right? And then so your child then will know, okay, this is what mom and dad will do if one of my friends tells me, and this is what I'm on the lookout for. You just built an active bystander. You just built community. You just went over a plan, and you didn't directly like tell your child, like, expect this to happen to you, right? Like, nobody wants to do that. But I think that's the more digestible way to do it. And then you have to, as parents, like, really work on being an absolute listener. You know, like, do you just want me to listen, or do we need a solution like right now? Or how, like, you know, what's the plan? And you have to talk about it. I don't think, I've been talking to my daughter about sexual assault since she was probably about 4 years old, just because of how she got into the world.
Yeah.
And I, you know, parents were like, oh my gosh, like, you're so open with her. And I'm like, yeah, she's a growing person. Like, you have to have these conversations, or your kid's not going to know anything. They're going to be like green as can be when they enter the world. And
If you don't teach them, they'll go find out from somebody.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like, you know, like, and you know, she asked all kinds of questions, and we just give her like straight answers, you know, like, I don't know, she saw something about like heroin, and she was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's a drug. And I was just like, you know, it was just like a casual exchange, but you have to have like, that's the rapport we have. And I think it's really important to build that. Right. Like, like, you know, like, if you don't have that and your kid came home and was like, Mom, what's this drug? You'd be like, why are you asking me that? Like, you know, your mind's going to freak out. But we have this rapport with one another that's just, she's curious, she's questions, we have answers.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because parents do freak out, right? And it's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? It's, you know, a kid asks you about sex and you don't want to talk to them about sex because you think they're going to have it. Hello, they are. So why not educate them about
Or
it?
you think it's just that easy to just like, I'm just going here and have sex. Like, that's just the easiest thing in the world to do. Like,
ridiculous. It's a cognitive distortion that needs to be addressed. But you said something else that's really critical, Caitlin, and I want to touch on it, because when it comes to the conversations, what I see in my clients when I'm working with them around parental executive functioning is people are scared to death to have frequent conversations, partly because nobody had the conversation with them. So they don't know how to have the conversation. So here's a resource that I want to share with you. If you go to YouTube and you type in Barbara Sinatra Center for Abused Children, I use a lot of that center's videos. They're animated videos for kids, and particularly for kids from kindergarten to 8th grade. It's just, they're phenomenal educational videos. They're animated. They're designed based on all of, you know, they talk about cyberbullying and good touch, bad touch, and stranger day, but it's based in the language that the 2022 kids of today are using. And, you know, so it's talking about the internet and all these different things, and what grooming looks like in the school environment and at home and next door neighbors and all of these things. So it's a phenomenal resource. I've been using it clinically for a really long time. It is a great way to initiate those conversations. And what I recommend is that parents look at those videos, and they're short videos. Like, the longest one is like 5 minutes or something like that. But they're 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes videos. It's an entire series where you can go in, you as the parent can watch those videos. It'll be instrumental in helping you to know how to navigate those conversations with your child, the appropriate language to use, how to keep yourself emotionally regulated so that your child feels safe in having those discussions with you. If you're someone who's parenting a student athlete or just your kids, period, you have to develop a level of comfort in being able to have the hard conversations. And the reality of it is that we know that across the board, you know, parental executive functioning skills vary from parent to parent. Like Caitlin, you were saying, you know, your husband has this presence and he's the more calm, level-headed one, right? You know, it's the same thing when I think about my parents. My mom is the hothead. My dad is like laid back, cool and chill, but piss him off if you wanna. It's gonna be
sounds like a pattern of females and males, what I'm hearing from both of y'all.
I knew he was gonna say something slick.
I just have to embrace it. It's all good though. That's what we love about you.
Of motherhood, Ronnie.
Yeah, you wait till your son's giving you a run for your money, your button heads, and your wife's gonna be like,
see, Caitlin, here's the thing about me though. Like, I'm a diehard mama's boy to the day I die. Like, I'm a classic. I already know what to expect. I tell his mama all the time, like, it's cute, cuddly now. Wait till them words start coming out. I'm ready. Because he's a Gemini too, so I'm really excited to see how we mesh together.
Yeah.
Because like Gemini's are either one or the other. There's no in between.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was gonna say too. That was like one of the hardest eh, pills to swallow is when my daughter was like, I don't want to swim. And I was like, what?
ooh.
What? I don't what? Like,
Does she do any sports?
she plays basketball. Yeah. She has 3 games.
And volleyball, you said, right?
Yeah, she plays volleyball. But that was more of a like I let her play. I put her in every sport and I was like, let's try them all. And she was like, I don't really like sports. And I was like, what? What do you mean you don't like sports? What?
I do ask myself like if my son is like I'm because I'm the parent.
You
like
wait
everybody
till
says,
he comes home and says like, Dad, I want to play chess and chess only. And you're
Right.
gonna be
And
like,
I don't want to do
oh my
football
God.
or baseball.
Yeah, I don't
or
want to play
basketball.
football
Watch
for
Ronnie
you.
have a nervous breakdown.
see, it's crazy because like those are things I think about now. I'm just like, man, what if he says he doesn't want to play football? I don't know how. It would emotionally it would hurt. But we've talked about this on the show before. Honestly, I know the physical and mental toll that wanting to get to a certain level at a sport takes. I don't know if I would want him to take the risk that I subjected, because I tell people like I would die on a football field. Like when I was playing, I would have died on that football field with no questions asked, and I would have ran it all. I'd have done it all over again with no questions asked. I don't know if I would want him to have that type of mentality towards a sport.
Right.
I just know what that entails. So if he would have come home and say, I don't want to play football, emotionally, I would probably feel some type of way. But
he's gonna say he want to be on the debate team.
It's crazy.
Definitely.
My high school didn't have a debate team, and I wanted to be a part of the debate team so bad because I just love to debate. I love a good, healthy debate.
I wouldn't know anything about that. Wouldn't know anything about you wanting to debate. Nothing at all.
Caitlin, I did have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Well, not one last question, but one towards the topic. You did mention how when this first happened to you and everything, that you took your daughter to therapy and counseling, and eventually by taking her, it kind of got you into it as well. So I want you to, if you don't mind, kind of talk on like your therapeutic journey, after getting your daughter involved, and then what are some other maybe some resources or tips you might have to help somebody in their healing process, because therapy is not for everybody. And as much as I love to talk to people with the therapy and stuff like that, I also know that it's not for everybody. So what was your therapeutic journey like, and what are some other resources or recommendations you might make to somebody on their healing journey?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and then we see this in athletes, right? A lot. There were athletes that were more subjective to addictive personalities, addictive tendencies, right? Especially if you've been abused, you might self-medicate, right? That's a thing that happens often. And so I think just keep that in mind. Like I have a point to that. So when I started like talking about it, I had just had a shoulder surgery and was on pain medication. And so I kind of used it a little bit to like help me just like say it. And then I just wanted to sleep and my shoulder was on fire. Right. And then I ran out, my shoulder healed, and I was like, I was like, wanted to crawl out of my skin. My mom picked it up very immediately, and I went to like a 2-week inpatient care where they kind of like messed with medications a little bit. Like I was definitely on anti-anxiety for a while, or I still am, but then at the time, like it was for a different purpose. And so then it was funny because I was like taken to an inpatient therapy that like their focus was addiction, right? And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll like work this program or whatever. And like 6 months in, I was like, I'm not an addict, I'm not addicted to anything, I just had something really crappy happen to me, and like I see the value in the like 12 steps. But so then I like changed it again, right? Like I do this, like I make things fit to me. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna like, I'm not an addict, so I don't need the 12 steps to like get over addiction, but I see the value in the 12 steps just for getting over anything. And so, or like processing any kind of trauma. So then I stopped doing that, or like I stopped going to meetings. And then I started running a lot. and I got into this really like routine thing. And that was really helpful for my mental health, like running, because I had to hydrate and I had to eat well and I had to sleep well to run, right? To go on these long runs. So those things were in essence like a healing for me, like setting up and establishing this routine and like getting me to a space where I could accept help. And then there was so I obviously have a lot of PTSD. There was a lot of triggers, like especially like smell. There was like, I don't know why, there was like a specific smell that just would like set me off. And I was single for a very long time and, you know, just lived with my daughter, and I would like wake up in sweat, in like a sweat, like drenched. And I was like, how can I ever get married or like have a partner? And I can't even like, I wake up like this, right? And so I was like, I have to do something about this. And so I found an intensive PTSD trauma therapy at UT Southwestern in Dallas, Texas, which was really helpful. And it was mostly geared towards veterans. But when I called and I was just like, hey, this is my story. Like, can you help me? Like, I need some help. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, cause it doesn't say that you see like survivors, but you know, and they're like, after our treatment, they changed it. They changed their offerings to include survivors because it was basically the same. And then I did EMDR therapy, which is a rapid eye, the tapping and the lights, and then it disassociates like certain things with or memories with how do you say that, Dr. Pitts? Like it's a disassociative therapy.
Kind of like a that exactly.
So I did that. Yeah, I was like, yeah. So I did that. And that was really helpful too, because that allows me to do stuff like this, right? And just, you know, people feel a type of way about, you know, getting help or going to therapy. And in my brain, I was like, I got to do EMDR because I have to be in this fight and I have to tell this story over and over again. And I like, don't want to cry or like be upset or be drained or all the things that come with like, you know, telling your story. And so for me, it was like an enhancement to my performance, right? Like, again, like I look at everything as like, it's a competition, and it was with myself. Like, how am I going to be able to be the best, like policy advisor or fighter in this ring if I can't even talk about it without like having a breakdown? So that was helpful. And then, you know, I really got into practicing yoga. That came later, about 2 years ago, where I am so used to chaos and going, that I didn't know how to like stop and rest. Right. And I think the pandemic kind of did this to everybody. Like everything stopped. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do with like my busy brain, and like active mind, you know? So I started practicing yoga, and that really, I think, was like the cherry on top. That was like the last thing to this journey, this 13-year journey of healing, was that you know, I just accepted a lot of like some of the mantras and practices of like, you know, like that shame is not my shame to carry. It was not my responsibility as a child. What happens to you in life, you know, it's for a reason, and finding that inner peace in you, and finding a way to make it serve you and your story and your life, you know, it just kind of was the finality of that. So long journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And you made a great point. You know, you said this has been over the course of 13 years. And one of the things I always like to share with people is, you know, no matter what trauma you may have experienced in your life, you know, it doesn't go away overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It doesn't go away overnight. You know, but each individual day, choosing that day that I'm going to choose this day to be the best person I can be for this day, and then wake up and do the same thing again tomorrow. That shows a testament to, like you said, your consistency, your determination, your fortitude, your persistence, all those things that have made you into this individual you are today. So thank you for sharing that. And you know, as we get ready to wrap this up, you know, just thank you for sharing your testimony and your story. Real quick, tell the people how we can get in contact with you, and, you know, tell us a little bit about your business real quick and how they can get in contact with you for business inquiries as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a speaker with Rain. You can, that's how Dr. Pitts and I connected. If you ever feel like you're looking, it doesn't always have to be me. Sometimes I'm not the right speaker. There's been opportunities where I'm like, that's not for me. That's not really my message or my vibe. But Instagram, definitely find me on Instagram. It's at Kidd, Kate, KAIT _ Twitter is.
Oh,
Caitlin, your sound went out.
your sound went out.
Oh no, there. Can you?
We can hear you. You're all good now.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. There, just reach out to me if you want to, read or book or anything. For the most part, I don't really ever charge for services unless it's like actual like consulting. But like doing stuff like this, I love to do that. Like getting your story out and just talking to people, I think is super important. And it gives back to, creating communities. And so if that's the case, let me know. Let's talk about it. I love to get into it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Caitlin. 3 key things that I want to say as we wrap up for today. First, Caitlin, we love you already. You're officially adopted. You're a part of the family now. And you mentioned something during the show. You talked about you being the author of your life story, and that's actually an activity and a strategy that I use with my clients. And the way that rewriting your chapter life story goes is, when you think about your life's journey, there's parts of your life story that I like to call chapters. And within those chapters, we adopt this narrative that we tell ourselves about our life's journey. And I've said before on the show, a chapter of my life story was teen mom. And for a long time, it was embarrassment, shame, guilt. Same thing with the sexual assault my freshman year in undergrad at Howard, embarrassment, shame, guilt. But when I realized through my own therapist several years ago, like, wait a minute, I have the paintbrush. I can paint my masterpiece that's representative of my life story. I hold the pen. I can rewrite my story. So the way that activity works is you decide what is a title, if you will, in your life story that you could benefit emotionally from rewriting that story, rewriting that part of your life. And as I've rewritten, just as Caitlin did, as I rewrote those chapters of my life, they're now symbolic of survivor, advocate, strength, tenacity, veracity, the list goes on. You get to rewrite the story and flip it so that you can take your power back from whatever it was that robbed you of your power in life. And you can be empowered and know that the sexual assault, the gender violence, the molestation, whatever it is that's happened to you that's traumatic in nature, it doesn't rob you of your power permanently unless you decide that it should. Rewrite your story and take your power back. The second thing that I want to mention is I want to reiterate why praise is important in sports. And that is, praise provides information to athletes, not only about performance, but also about sense of self. In other words, it tells athletes about the quality of their performance, but it also tells them about their self-worth and their competence. You can use praise in a balanced way to build up your athlete's sense of self. And then the last thing that we're going to leave you with today is the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. If you or someone that you know is the victim of sexual assault, rape, or gender violence, please call that number 24/7 help that is confidential and available to you, or call 911. But we want you to report. We're here for you. We are supportive of you. You can go to the RAIN website. That's RAINN.org. There's also additional resources on that website, as well as other resources locally, regionally, and nationally. That's all we have for you today, folks. Caitlin, we love you. We love you. Love you. Love you. Thank you so very much for making time for us today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Great Saturday, everyone. Caitlin, keep doing what you're doing. Your footprint is all over this nation, woman. It's going to be all over the world.
I love it.
Caitlin, I got $20. I can see you in 50 meters.
Yeah.
freestyle, not no backstroke, not doggy style.
The thing about racing is that everybody just wants to go like from here to here. Like a real race is like at least 2 laps. So you want to go 2 laps?
So 100 meters. Now my kick off the wall is, hey, like I got a little horsepower in that kick. So,
That's cute. My dive is better, but you want to push off however you want to do it. And that, we'll set it up. We'll do it. Let's do it for charity. Let's go.
We'll have to set it. We'll have to set it up.
Yeah.
But
you let me know.
It was a pleasure.
Nice to meet you guys too. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say, like I say this, it's kind of like been coming a pretty a tagline. Like I feel like it's really important to recover loudly so that people don't have to suffer in silence. And so thank you guys so much for giving me a chance to like tell my story, talk about recovery and journeys, therapy journeys. Like it's a long process, but I promise it's okay. It's going to be okay. And there's light at the end of the tunnel. And not to forget, like you're the author of your own story. So thank you guys so much for letting me come on and tell my own.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good Saturday, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.